So in paying salespeople, there are, I suppose you need to first of all consider the different ways that you can pay people. So you've got base pay, which is generally a fixed cost that's known to the employer, like your salary, basically at the end of the day, and the employee knows what their take-home pay is. And then you also can consider things like variable pay. So variable pay are things like bonuses or commission payments, which are variable in nature. So the amount that it costs the employee or employer and the amount that the employee receives can vary depending on the performance measures that it's linked to. With sales employees, it is probably, they would have more of a preference towards variable pay, because generally the performance measures for sales employees are linked directly. They have a clear line of sight with what they actually do on a day-to-day basis, so what they're actually selling. So this comes back to the volumes that they're selling and the revenues and profit that they're returning. My preference when looking at sales employees is to give a mix of base pay and variable pay. And the benefit of this is that, I suppose, if you take it from an employer's point of view, firstly, in terms of the base pay, the employer knows absolutely their fixed cost from month to month, so they know at a minimum what the employee is going to cost them. And also from the employee's perspective, they know that they've got a minimum take-home pay that they can work around. Then looking at the variable pay, that then allows the employer to really leverage and incentivize the employee around specific things that are important to the business. So, for example, to meet specific targets about sales volumes, to meet particular revenues, to meet profits. So linking directly what that payment is being made for to what's important to the business. And then from the employee's point of view, that's really beneficial as well, because they have full clarity on how they can actually achieve that variable pay through those clear objectives that are set. I suppose there are some important caveats around that variable pay is around the rules and guideline and structure around what that variable pay is set up like. So for example, for the employer, you need it to be set up in such a way that it delivers the performance that you need, but it doesn't become cost impeding, so that the employee kind of blows the budget through the variable cost. So there needs to be some rules there around ceilings and floors maybe to that variable pay. And also then from the employee's perspective, they need to know the boundaries within which that works. So that's probably more on the floor of the variable pay, so that having to achieve a minimum amount of performance in order to even start receiving any of that variable pay. But generally a mix of base and variable pay is preferable for sales employees. So for sales staff, there is, I suppose it's like with any role that you have, you need to really consider the objectives that you would set for the individuals and and then measuring performance. So really important, particularly in today's market, to do that. And I think that's a need both from an employer's point of view, but also from an employee's point of view. Employees want to know at the end of the day that they've done a really good job, and that they can assess that through clear objectives, and also to be rewarded for it. So in the instance of sales employees, I suppose there's probably some quantifiable measures that can be used to measure performance, and also qualitative measures. And maybe one of the oversights sometimes with incentivizing sales employees is that there's too much of a leniency on the quantifiable measures and not the qualitative ones. So if we look at the quantifiable measures, these would be things like what's the volumes of the number of products that they're selling, what are maybe the revenue that they're taking in, what is the margin that they're taking in, the profitability of the products, what are maybe the number of new customers that they're getting, what is the percentage of repeat customers that they're getting. So some of those kind of quantifiable measures, and setting clear targets and budgets at the start of the year, again going back to your feasibility on the economic conditions and where you see your sales are going to be. But they are quite clear things that you can measure in terms of literally counting and doing some analysis on numbers. But there's also the importance of of qualitative measures. So these are measures like feedback from customers around how the salesperson is dealing with them. And a good indicator of that will be, say, the repeat customers that the person will get, and hopefully with those repeat customers that there's increased volumes that are going through. Other things then to look at is maybe what is the product mix that's being sold. So is the individual continuously selling maybe the high profit margin figure products? So again, getting the right mix there on what's being measured. So you're not just incentivizing the person around maybe some of the higher profit margin goods, but also there might be other goods that might have a lower margin, but still that need to be sold. So getting that right mix, and then just even assessing the feedback, as I mentioned, on customers, but also maybe from peers, people that they're working with. So I suppose the what and the how of performance. So what they're actually doing, but how they're doing it, so that they're not undermining maybe or cutting over the sales of their colleagues, and that they're doing their job in an ethical and a moral way too. So that's quite an important matter. For sales employees, money is generally a key incentive. So it is quite. That would be the key driver for them in terms of performance. But there are other things which, the same as other employees, are key considerations. So things like pensions, and depending, I suppose, on the setup of the company, that's either providing people with a contributory pension scheme that they and the employer contribute to, or just even giving them, if it's a startup, giving them access to a pension. It mightn't necessarily be contributory from the employer, but just giving them that facility. I suppose having a very good expenses policy and approach is very important for sales employees. So you can imagine these people are out on the road, they're incurring expenses, maybe mileage, and maybe other miscellaneous expenses. So having a good expenses policy in a way that they can get those expenses reimbursed. Looking at things like healthcare, holidays, training, where they get access to good, I suppose, material for their own personal training and to enhance their skills. And as well, I suppose, being competitive with the market where that person is working. So again, I suppose to be able to attract and retain employees, you need to be competitive within the market that you're working. Evaluating your reward system is really taking stock of what the total cost of that employee is to you, and then what the return on that investment is. So that's taking the full cost of the reward package that they get themselves, that the employee receives themselves, but also maybe what the additional cost of that employee is to you. So things like the training, what's the opportunity cost if you were to lose that employee and you had to retrain somebody else. So understanding that full cost, and then assessing that against the performance. So what is the return that you're getting on this employee in terms of the revenue that you're getting, the volumes that you're selling, assessing how your performance targets that you set for that employee at the start of the year, how they are actually directly impacting your bottom line, and adjusting then those performance measures to make sure that it's you're leveraging their performance, and doing that both from the employee's perspective and from your perspective as well as the employer.